Welcome channel executives from both manufacturing and distribution. Thank you for joining us today. We are hosting today's workshop from our ideation room in Chicago. And we wanted to provide you with a peek behind the curtains of what our clients experience when they do a hands-on workshop with us. So today's market conditions we are in some really unique times, right? Executives across the channel, they're facing margin pressure, they're facing aging inventory, they're facing the challenges of sales growth targets. So in today's workshop, we're gonna address all of that and help you tackle these challenges head on and transform them into your biggest opportunities for 2024 and beyond. So what you'll walk away with today, you'll learn and you'll leave here today with insights to make more informed decisions, where things are at, where they are going, and you'll also leave here with tools and tactics to help you fix critical areas of your business so that you can get back to working on your overall plan for the year. Now, today we will cover 3 topics. The first topic is on building a profitability playbook to help you both maintain some of the record high profit levels experienced over the past 3 years, but also to grow it. And the second topic we'll dive into is on inventory optimization to help you drive more turns and more unit volume growth. And the third and final topic we'll dive into is on pricing optimization. And this will help you defend against margin compression and maximize the true potential across your entire organization. Now, with me here today are my esteemed colleagues to help us dive deep into these topics. We have John Gunderson and we have J Schneider. Welcome, guys. So together we are going to dive deep into these 3 topics. We will break down what all of us are seeing across our network of distributors and manufacturers, and we will share the latest benchmarking, best practices, and actionable strategies to make 2024 as successful as possible for you and your team. And we'll end each one of these 3 topics with some discussion to where we'll dive deeper into change management ideas for making these strategies easy for you to implement. So we'll finish today with a Q&A session. If you have any questions along the way, please post them to the comments section and we will address them at the end. Now that's a lot to unpack. So let's dive into the first topic, which is building a profitability playbook. Now, many of the organizations that we come across, they don't have a formal profitability playbook. Instead, they have a series of initiatives that they are working on to improve profit performance. And there's a difference between initiatives. They tend to be more episodic projects with a start and an end. And initiatives, they tend to be, let's say, siloed across organizations into very specific parts of the business. Whereas a playbook, if you went through the effort to formalize it, it provides a more holistic approach to profitability across the entire organization. And a playbook helps to build capabilities across your teams, and it helps to motivate your team members to change the way in which they are doing things, so the change management aspects, and do things differently. And it helps to improve profit performance on an ongoing basis year over year. So let's talk a little bit about the changes that have occurred. Another reason to formalize profitability playbook for your organization is because a lot has changed in the past 4 years. And that rate of change, it's not slowing down. You know, things look very different today than they did in 2019. And they will look very different 3 years from now. So in the channel, we are hearing a lot of people comment. You know, operating in 2024 is much like operating in 2019. It's going back to the way they used to do things. Now, we are witnessing companies go back to their familiar tactics from 2019. And we would caution you not to fall back into that trap Many things have changed since 2019, and those changes are dictating different strategies and tactics to be successful moving forward. More importantly, this poses a new opportunity to do things differently from your competition, who likely may be reverting to their legacy tactics. So this is a great time and a great way to steal market share and to never have to give it back. So let's dive into the profitability framework. Here's the framework for your modern profitability playbook. It's structured around addressing 5 critical challenges organizations face today. Feel free to personalize this to your organization, whether you are a manufacturer or a distributor. These aspects are transferable and will help the channel work together in a more effective manner. So to overcome these challenges, organizations need to build new capabilities. This will require that your teams get better at leveraging data and analytics. That is the underpinning to all of this, right? And building new capabilities. So let's dive into the first challenge. Challenge number 1, how to maintain record high profits. That's a big question. The capabilities required to address this challenge will be implementing enterprise profitability controls. Now, the objective in doing this is, in building these controls, is to develop a end-to-end strategy that enables your team to both maintain and grow revenue and profit. Some examples of some key actions and initiatives that would be taken here are, number 1, doing a process evaluation to see where you have, or to see where you lose margin across your purchasing, your selling, your servicing aspects of your business. Now for manufacturers and distributors, this could be just doing a margin leakage analysis, right? Or looking at cost to serve analysis across your inventory, your products, and your customers. And the more advanced you are at this, the more you can start to see or use a data cube to where you get really pinpointed with where there are losses and where there are gains. Now for distributors, this could mean moving more capabilities to be more corporate-led versus branch-led. And this is an evolution for a lot of firms, but bringing more of that capability back to corporate could help really implement some of those enterprise profitability controls and whatnot. Or even creating a manufacturing workbench is another common strategy that we deploy here to help distributors claim every dollar that is potentially earned. So all of these are great examples of what you would see within this first portion of the playbook here. And all of them are going to require the use of getting more advanced with your data and analytics capabilities. So let's move to the second challenge. Challenge number 2, how to maintain unit volume sales. The capabilities required to address this challenge will be market development. Your ability to effectively steal market share. The objective in building stronger market development capabilities is to plan to grow revenue and take share with your customers and with your product expansion. You could grow share with existing customers using new products, using new lines, improved services. You could use market level pricing here. But the end-all be-all here is partnering with strategic manufacturers if you're a distributor, use customer-specific programs, and use pricing to help you drive market development here. Another way to look at this is existing customer programs versus new customer acquisition programs. Market development is going to require that you get really good at hunting and really good at entering in new territories and bringing new customers into your distributorship. And distributors could leverage their resources and partnerships with their strategic suppliers to really help drive new customer acquisition into their distributorships. Let's move on to our third challenge, which is how to prevent lowering prices. This requires capability around building pricing controls. And the idea here is you want to be able to build pricing programs that maximize gross margin without curtailing top-line sales growth. Now, we're going to dive really deep into this topic a little bit later today, but some of the key actions here that you're going to want to consider are looking at both customer and product segmentation. So using an A, B, C, D segmentation strategy to really pinpoint where there are opportunities to actually raise prices and where there are opportunities where you can recognize that you're capturing higher margins. So with a segmentation strategy on both levels, you're going to be able to really get creative and empowered here across your teams. So this is another one where it does require using a lot of advanced data and analytics, but we'll dive into this later. So let's move on to our fourth challenge, which is how to maintain rebate dollars. Now, the capabilities required on this one are going to be for distributors to really build active category management capabilities. And then on the flip side for manufacturers, it's going to be, we're going to need to get really strategic on who you're giving rebate dollars to and what some of those programs are going to look like. So for the distribution side of it, active category management really entails trying to build up your teams to where there's consistent focus on it. And a lot of times that means moving away from just having individual buyers at branches and moving into more of a corporate level capability where you're creating strategic, preferred, and regular based suppliers. You're creating this segmentation strategy where you're getting the best terms, the best deals, and the best resources out of your key suppliers. And then on the manufacturing side, try and work your way through to become that top tier supplier when it comes to working with your distribution partners. So that strategic level, you're going to get the best programs from that distributor. You're going to get the best opportunities and maybe be able to convert the majority of their share from your product categories into your brand. You want to convert that away from your competitor's share. So let's move into the fifth challenge, which is how to maintain cash flow and operating capital. And this is going to require building capabilities around inventory optimization. And this is another topic we're going to dive into in our next segment here. Jay's going to walk us through some fantastic strategies of what you can actually deploy within your playbook on how you can create best practice programs. We're going to dive a little bit into, doing inventory segmentation and then trying to establish best practice benchmarks on where you need to be with your A's, your B's, and your C's, and rebalance inventory to be able to, use that working capital in new ways to drive more velocity around your A items and B items. So as a distributor, it's a very effective way to not only redeploy your working capital, but increase unit volume growth. So if you're a manufacturer working with distributors, just be mindful that if you're bringing your data into what your A's, B's, and C's are to key distributors based on the region that they're serving, you can both drive unit volume growth by focusing on putting more of the A's and B's in inventory to where it's that same day, next day inventory for the distributor. And that's going to help both parties really drive unit volume growth here. All right, so this is the profitability playbook. You want to focus on building capabilities in all 5 of these areas. And once again, this is a framework. Make it personalized to your organization, but make it formal to where your teams are all looking at this in the same way and you're all working towards increasing profitability across the organization. So let's dive into our next segment here, which is going to be inventory optimization. And to start us off here, J Schneider is going to walk us through. Jay, let's do it.
Let's talk about optimizing inventory. When we think about optimizing inventory, we think about maximizing growth. Top line sales growth is really around understanding how you can leverage your inventory position and have the right product at the right time in the right place. Most companies will take their inventory and rank it A, B, C, or D. Some will have it as A and B, some will have it as A, B, and C. Illustratively, we've shown you here A, B, C, and D. Now, best practice in the industry is that your A SKUs, your top SKUs, might represent 50% of your inventory position at any one given time. Number two is your B SKUs might represent around 30% of that inventory, right? So about 80% of that inventory is in your A and B. Remaining best practice, your C would be about 15% and your D maybe 5%. Now you're always going to have some level of each within your organization. It's never going to be 0 C's or 0 D's. But the question is how you manage that. What we find with our clients today, what we find in the industry, is what actually happens is that your A's are really below, maybe 94, 95% of where they should be to meet the demand and serve your customers the best you can. The B customers, or the B SKUs, those really around 73 to 75% of the inventory level it should be. And your D's and your C's are making up a disproportionate amount of the inventory, what it should be. So think of your B's as falling in no man's land because your C's and D's are kind of taking up more inventory space in your organization. And what gets squeezed is your B SKUs. Now your A's will drop a little bit. The B's will take most of that hit in your organization. So if we look to the right and we think about different types of insights and actions and impact to your organization that you can take, we kind of divide it into 3 different areas. The first is that you're probably most likely over allocated in your C's and D's. And that over allocation in your company will not allow you to do some things in your A's and B's that you would want to do to better serve your customers. The action that you can take is you can partner with your manufacturer supplier, you can partner with them in understanding what you can do to move those C's and D's out of your inventory. In some cases, you might be able to return that inventory back to your supplier, but jointly working with them together to serve that end customer and understand what products they need or move it to a different channel where the value of that C and D SKU might be higher. Okay? The impact of that should directly affect the profitability of your business. If you can reduce those C's and D's within your organization, you should see between a 10 and 30% increase in your business profitability and your inventory turns as a result of that. The second one I wanted to talk about is the underallocated B's. Now again, those B's are taking the squeeze of the C's and D gain in your inventory. So as you think about reallocating your inventory, if you can reallocate a greater proportion to the A's and B's, you'll be in a better position to serve same day, next day service to those end customers. So because those B's are under allocated, you don't really have the right level of inventory at the right time in the right place. And it's probably obvious that if you don't have what the customer needs, you can't get it to them in a timely manner and you can't sell what you don't have. It might be obvious, but you'd be surprised how difficult that can be for some cases. And lastly, the C SKUs or the C inventory. The challenge you have with the C inventory is they haven't risen up to the ability to become a B, and they run the risk of becoming a D quickly. And you need to manage those C's so they do not become a D, and you can actively work with your supplier in determining the best strategy to move those C's to a B or move them out of your inventory with your supplier and have a better strategy to serve your end customers. At the bottom, what we talked about is that those C's and D's have a big impact to your business. And lastly, freeing up $1 in that slow-moving inventory can translate to a 2 to 3 times return in your A's and B inventory. And what that simply means is that as you move the focus from your C's and D's, even if it's small to even smaller, you'll get a greater focus on the A's and B's. What you'll see in the next graphic is the A and B SKUs. If they're in stock and they're readily available to your customers, they'll be in a better position to serve them. What you want to avoid is over inventory of your C's and D's, which you may not serve next day or same day. You want to focus on those A's and B's, which are a lion's share of your opportunity with your end customers and your revenue, and make sure that they're in a position to serve your customers either same day or next day. And a very few of those A's and B's, very little, might be 3 days or longer.
Jay, I love that point, especially when it comes to same day and next day inventory. I mean, as a distributor and as a manufacturer, you want maximum first time fill rates for the channel. Those distributors and manufacturers that win the fill rate battle win the customer. So if you can get a 95% first time fill rate by having the proper A's and B's, you're going to take share from your competition. Because when they go to the competition down the street, they may be out of a high moving item. And that is going to leave a very bad impression. So if you can build your depth of your A's and B's to improve your first time fill rate, it's the number one way to grow as a distributor. It's the number one way to grow as a manufacturer.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Those A's and B's are critically important in today's market. It's fast paced out there, and customers do not have the patience to wait necessarily for you to get those A's and B's in stock because they need them today. They're expecting them to be in inventory, and if they're not, they're going to have to go somewhere else to go get it.
Yeah, I think, guys, what I'm taking away from this is this is an excellent way for manufacturers to hit on their primary goal, which is unit volume growth. So if manufacturers can partner with their distributors in deeper ways like this to where they're helping distributors rebalance their inventory and segment their inventory based on high moving versus slow moving, this frees up working capital for these distributors to drive more of the A's and B's, right? Same day, next day. And this is where manufacturers can bring in their own data, sets of data to say, hey, this is an A SKU for me as a manufacturer in this specific region. It might be a C or a D for you, Mr. Distributor, but if we drive more optimization around your inventory, freeing up working capital, we can push more of these SKUs into your local market here. And even helping distributors with pulling back some slow-moving inventory. Return goods authorizations could be a bigger play here moving forward, but there may be an upside advantages to manufacturers, bringing in additional SKUs into their distributor relationships. So, ideal time to work with your distributors in a very close fashion, using data on both sides of the conversation here to really figure out new ways to drive unit volume growth.
Yeah, James, I would just add one thing that I think a lot of manufacturers don't think about. You have to choose your distribution partners carefully, and you have to factor inventory into it. So I'll give you, for example, let's say you're 3M, and you've got two distributors who aren't properly stocking your product, and you have a contractor that goes into the first distributor, and they say, I don't have it.
Yeah.
And then they go to the second distributor that doesn't have the inventory, and they say, I don't have it. So what is that customer thinking? They've just been to two distributors, and they haven't been able to find your product. They're not blaming the distributor, they're blaming you. They're wondering what's up with 3M when I can't find their product at two distributors. They may go to an alternate source, an alternate product. It may take you a long time to change that perception with a very important customer.
Yeah, and I think, John, you bring up a good point here that the alignment between the supplier and the distributor about what is an A SKU, what is the expectation of the market with these types of products. And I think that alignment is sometimes missing, that I call it an A, supplier calls it a B, or even if they still call it A, they don't treat it necessarily the same all the time. And it's critically important that an A to you is an A to my supplier, which is also an A to my customer. It's everyone's A, right? A B is everyone's B. Now, different customers may have, that's a critical, important, high value product for them, which is your B, but it's still important to them. But you don't want the customer saying this is an A and you and the supplier treating it like a D. Or the customer saying this is really a D product and you're saying we're going to treat it like an A because we're going to convince you to buy more of it. And the customer's not asking for it. That alignment's really important in understanding how you rank those SKUs to make sure they are aligned with you and the supplier and the distributor, as well as the end market needs and demand.
Yeah, Jay, you and I were just talking the other day how this is so important for that relationship. I mean, we're talking about stock outs or inadequate stock. How many times has a distributor told their end customer, I am a premier 3M partner, right?
Sure.
They're out there, but their behavior doesn't support that.
Correct.
So they go out, that customer comes in and says, oh, they're premier 3M. They come in, they have a bad experience. That bad experience gets transferred back to your brand. So you have to pick your partners closely, and you've got to work together to make sure if they are a premier partner, you're properly supporting each other as premier partners.
Absolutely. Really, really important. Now we want to dive into supplier scorecard. Now, yes, supplier scorecards are nothing revolutionary. Most of you have them in some form or some capacity. What we would contend here in best practice is go beyond your top performing SKUs from a sales, revenue, or profit perspective. Look beyond just saying, hey, what is my top selling SKUs? What is my bottom selling SKUs? And reporting that back. What you can see here is there's opportunity to really institute best practice in the market to put your supplier in a position to better serve you and your customers together. And so what you'll see here is that you have things like average SKU transaction size, lines per order, number of lines, negotiated CSP sales performance, to name a few. All of these will help you understand the why behind a SKU's position, whether it's an A, B, C, or D. Understanding that a SKU is an A simply because it sells the most doesn't necessarily give you enough information to know how to properly address or forecast those SKUs for future demand or customer needs. And then we move to the supplier benefits of this. So we think about this in a couple contexts. One is that the supplier should be in a position to gain incremental market share. Most important, this information is going to help them better position their product with the distributor, with their channel partners, as well as better serve the end customers. In addition to that, the supplier should be in a better position to grow their lines within these distributors, which is really important. Now, not all distributors carry everything of what you sell. But if you have the right product focused in your right market, you should be in a better position to grow those lines within those channels. And then third, the joint planning calls or the joint work out in the field. That's going to bring back a significant insight back to the organization. But those calls and those engagements with those end customers is going to put the supplier in a better position to make sure they have the right inventory to put out in the market to better serve their distributors. Meaning that if the demand is for those A's and B's, they're in a position through that customer-backed research and customer-backed data to ensure they have A SKUs and B SKUs in the market at the right time within the right region. James, thoughts about how manufacturers can leverage these scorecards really to start, changing their business to better serve those end customers?
Yeah, Jay, and it's a fascinating topic because it's not new. A lot of manufacturers are used to working with distributors who are tracking a lot of different data points on performance and whatnot. I think what you pointed out here is that it's not enough just to track it. You got to move into this joint planning aspect to where both the distributor and the supplier are starting to share more of these data points in a lot of these joint planning discussions. And this is what we've been seeing a large trend behind, is this data is very powerful for both manufacturers and the distributors to create better, more strategic programs to drive more volume. And from a manufacturer standpoint, the deeper they get into this planning, the stronger they become against stealing share away from their competitors. So if manufacturers are anxious to get this and they're driving their distributors to create better programs, that share is being converted into those strategic suppliers.
Yeah, Jay, I just think you covered a lot, especially on what I call the inventory segmentation and the scorecard. I think a lot of times it's really simple. And distributors and manufacturers don't think as simple as they need to be. Mm-hmm. So why do you want maximum first-time fill rates? It's the number one thing a customer rates you on. So first-time fill rates. And if you think about what your sales teams spend a lot of non-selling time on, back orders, stuff they're trying to chase down. Yeah. They're spending all their time trying to fix a problem they wouldn't have if they had better first-time fill rates, right? Customer comes in, you can fill their whole order. You don't have to chase down a back order. So I think sometimes it's that simple. How are you building a system and a distribution network to make sure you have maximum first-time fill rates? Those distributors that do that take share and they never give it back.
Yep.
Yeah, and John, from what you've been seeing with distributors, how much of this data do they actually open up to their key suppliers?
Yeah, you're seeing more of it. Distributors and manufacturers are getting better at bringing in the customer data, the inventory data, the sales data, hey, they went to the website and searched for this. They're getting better at bringing in multi-level data. So there's improvement, but there's still a lot of focus on things that don't drive sales. Chasing down back orders because we don't have our inventory position right. Chasing down products we don't have priced right. Think about how much time you spend there that doesn't net you a single additional dollar as a manufacturer and distributor. That's one of the reasons you want to have a core SKU list. And a core SKU list is SKUs that I've got to have that drive maximum growth for me. So, that core SKU list is the best of your A's and B's for your top customers. Think about it, it is your bread, your milk, your cheese in the store. What can you not be out of? If you can maximize your first-time fill rates on your core SKUs, that is the way to grow as a distributor and a manufacturer.
Great job, Jay, on wrapping up the supplier scorecard. So the next part of the inventory optimization segment here is to talk about segmentation with core, non-core, and regional SKUs. And John Gunderson will walk us through that.
Let's talk inventory segmentation beyond the A, B, C, D level. This is a model that we use at Dorn with our partners, really building a core SKU list. So if you look here, a core SKU list is really made up of SKUs from your strategic and your preferred suppliers. The suppliers that are most important to you. It influences, but it doesn't dictate stocking behavior. But you really want to drive your customer SKU selection to the highest profitable SKUs you can. If you have a good core SKU list, you can grow top line sales and margin at the same time. And then you want to drive inventory efficiencies. Jay talked about it a lot today. Getting more A's and B's, increasing your turns, increasing how often you move through your inventory is key. So you really want to build a list of core SKUs. Now you may be a distributor that doesn't have the same manufacturer partners in Omaha that you do in Florida. So you may have different SKUs that you've got to support. In those cases, you got to have it regionalized by supplier, by product category. And you've got to spend your time, your team's time has to be spent at the core SKU and regional core SKU level. That is the breakthrough. What you will often find is your teams, manufacturers and distributors, is spent on your non-core SKUs. Stuff that's not moving. I'm wasting a lot of time. I'm trying to get this sent back. That's why if you partner with your suppliers as a distributor and you partner with your distributors as a manufacturer, that's the top way to grow, but concentrate 90% of your effort on your core SKUs. James, what do you think?
Yeah, John, what really strikes me on this topic is the regionality of a lot of our clients' businesses, because every region, at least in North America, it's going to have a different install base of end customers. So, you might be heavy manufacturing, a heavy vertical of manufacturing in certain regional markets. And nowadays, when you consider, especially a lot of the digital selling, you're getting a national reach potentially through your digital selling tools, but you still may have a very regional audience. So What trends are we seeing more on the regionality side of this, John? Because there is a really different mix of products and demand within each one of these markets, we'll say.
Yeah, James, I don't know if that challenge is ever going to go away, because in some markets you've got an alliance with a manufacturer, and in another market they may not want you on that level.
Yeah.
So I don't know if that's going to go away, but I think what has happened is you can process and manage much more data, that you can build better models to get at the data quicker, to get down a level. In the past, you had to let a lot happen locally, regionally. Now you can consolidate that a lot more and use data for those areas where you can't consolidate your lines across the nation.
I think that's a great point. John, the data aspect of this cannot be underestimated, in the sense that historically, suppliers and distributors have been reactive in this, right? The data allows them to be proactive in understanding where they should be placing the inventory, what regions are going to react or respond to different inventory positions, and also do a better job in forecasting that inventory, or forecasting where it should be, when it should be, for that regionality. The reactive aspect of it is really a model of 20 years ago. We keep running out of product in a certain region. We're low in, region XYZ. Now, with the data and the use of the analytics that companies are deploying, they should be able to say, hey, based on where this demand curve is going, we'll need to ramp up inventory in this region, most likely in 6 to 8 months. We are going to be underserving our current levels. We'll underserve the market at that time. That's a big piece of that data and how it's evolving today in the marketplace.
That's great. So John, from a manufacturer standpoint, a lot of the manufacturers might have a national focus, but or have a sales structure that's very regionalized. For helping some of those sales leaders on the manufacturing side approach distributor customers with ideas on how to drive more velocity in their local market around certain SKUs, what would best equip them to have that conversation with key distributors on a regional basis?
Yeah, I think, James, a lot of manufacturers miss an important point. They don't come in with their A, B, C, D SKU ranking and talk to their distributors. So here's my experience as a distributor. If a manufacturer has a 20 share in Chicago and they want a 30 share, what's their go-to button? They usually don't go back to their existing distribution group because they're not talking to them with enough data. What do? They add distribution, right? So you end up with manufacturers are adding to distribution to get to the 30%. Well, the more you add to get to 30%, then you've got 12 people pricing your product instead of maybe 8 before. What does that mean when 12 people are pricing to 10 customers? They're putting price pressure on you, right? Mm-hmm. You're getting to 30%, but they're driving the market levels down. And I think that's just a big miss. And then what happens when they get to 35 and the margin's down? What's the go-to button for a manufacturer? They prune distribution. They go back in and they take off the 8 people again. So to not play the yo-yo game, you really got to look at your distributors you have and identify the ones that can actually help you grow in core SKUs that improve your first-time fill rates, and invest in those distributors. Then when you get to 30% share, you're actually at the best margin you could imagine.
So the flip side of this, John, is a distributor who's trying to expand their regional reach, and they may not have the strategic relationships with certain suppliers in some key markets where there's a huge upside opportunity. What are we advising those distributors to do to get some of the best programs, the best terms, and the best support from some of those regional high-moving manufacturers?
Yeah, you come in with data, you come in with how their SKUs rank for you. Mm-hmm. You come in with a core SKU list and say, here's the core SKUs that I've got designated for you. Here's 2 or 3 others that maybe we could make core if we could come up with a good program. And you come in with data from a distributor perspective. The manufacturer's not going to be used to that type of conversation. And they're going to go back to their headquarters and say, hey, you know what? John Distribution actually came with me a plan, and maybe we ought to invest with John because he's really focused on growing and helping me grow while I maintain my margins. That is a way to do it as a distributor, and it's also a win-win for a manufacturer. And I think some of the big national distributors do that well, but some of the regionals and some of the locals have some catch up to do. But I would say no matter what market you're in, if you can get more organized, there are distributors you can go out and take share from. The same thing on a manufacturer side.
John, Jay, great job on the inventory optimization topic here. Well, let's move to our next topic, which is pricing optimization. And John will kick us off here. John?
So let's start with talking about pricing, and I think a good place to start for many distributors and manufacturers is really the pricing type you're using today. So on screen, we're really showing you the majority of distributors are using a very, what I would call gut feel pricing system, where the sales team is driving the majority of the pricing decisions. Now in the past, when you had extremely experienced sales teams, you can get away with that. But today, as your teams retire out, you've got to have a more fact-based system. So as you can see here, a lot of gut feel. When you go left to right, you can see how the pricing decision is made. When you look at the price moderators, it's the fear of losing the sale that drives price down. It's what I call fair price. When I was in distribution, for example, I was taught that a fair price for a commodity product was between 10 and 15%. A fair price for a non-commodity product was 20 to 25%. So when they left it up to me and I wanted to give a fair price to a customer, I gave them what I thought was a fair price. So this drives a lot of distributor price making today from a cost up basis, and it makes it much more gut feel. Not necessarily a bad thing, but as you move forward and you're trying to get more pricing control to be able to grow your business, you've really got to move to a more value pricing approach. And on this screen, on this shot, you can see what a value pricing approach is. The number one difference is it's more central led. You're still letting your sales team be very involved, but you're bringing in data. You're bringing in customer research. You're asking the customer why they buy. You're bringing in your segmentation, the size of the customer. You actually may be going out and grabbing prices from the web to compare against. This is what I call a much more fact-based model and where you got to get to. So instead of gut feel, you're moving to more a fact-based decision. When you can get to a value pricing model as a distributor, you can make better decisions based on data. So more data, less gut feel. So if you're in this journey, if you feel you were really on a normal distributor and you're trying to get more on a value priced approach, you've got to take some steps. And where that really happens is when you bring in the 3-cube model. You want to bring in customer data, your inventory data, and your supplier data. So do not make pricing decisions in one dimension. Make them by size of customer, what they're buying. Make them based on your inventory valuation. Where do you have great depth of product? High moving product, where are your A's at? You got to make different pricing decisions for your A items versus your C items. And then what can your supplier partners, your manufacturer partners bring? What are they selling? A, B, C's that you're not. Where can you expand and improve your breadth and depth of inventory? I think many distributors and manufacturers do not think of it in a multi-faceted approach. Those are the 3 areas you really got to attack it. James, what do you think?
Yeah, it's fascinating. Yeah, it's fascinating, John. I think one thing from our perspective is that all of this makes sense in concept, but where the rubber meets the road is how do organizations actually go about changing their teams to operate in this type of fashion? And it's probably more of a change management exercise to where they've got to be able to say, okay, here's the new course that we're chartering. and here's the data that we're going to need, and here's what this is going to look like for the broader organization, especially the sales team in this. So maybe, John, I mean, we see a lot of this. What's helpful for teams to keep in mind as you're going through this journey?
Yeah, James, I would say it really, one area that most distributors and manufacturers do a very poor job of is benchmarking their price profile. So where do your associates feel you need work? We've been doing survey work for over a decade in the channel, nonstop. And we've never run into a distributor or manufacturer who feels they're lower priced than the competition. They always feel they're higher priced than the competition. So you have to be able to benchmark and get good feedback from your customers to understand where you can push higher and where you can't, and make better commercial decisions. So I think many people just do not treat pricing with the same discipline that they do product training. So many times when we're out, right, as a team, we're talking to distributors, and I ask them, do you have pricing training? Do you lunch and learns on pricing? And they're like, no, but we do a lunch and learn on how this new product is built. But people do not invest in pricing as distributors and manufacturers, and they need to really step up and do more. Jay, what's your thoughts?
It's a great point that most organizations will spend a disproportionate amount of their time focusing on the product or the thing they sell or the service they provide. And what we're articulating here is there's not enough time and focus on the pricing portion of this, which would drastically change or has the ability to drastically change your business in a more meaningful way. And let me give you an example. So we talked about change, and as organizational change occurs, often what's missing is that end game, or what does success at the end of this journey look like? And so as you align your organization, is everyone aligned on the benefits, the reasons, and the tools and tactics you will use to go through this journey in shifting more from maybe a product-centric approach to incorporating pricing strategies as part of that go-to-market strategy? And if you can do that, I think the organization will see the benefits of that faster and quicker. And then the organization will also embrace that change in a more meaningful way. And then they'll allow to deploy that quicker. Ultimately, your customer will see the benefits of this, right? They're the ones that are going to observe the benefit of what change you've gone through as an organization. They're going to see that in how you work with them and how you engage with them on a daily basis.
So guys, one thing that we see as a big challenge in changing any type of pricing model is the implementation of it. And the sales team is generally at the heart of a lot of the change management behind these pricing models because they've been operating a certain way for years, if not decades. So now that you try and institute a new pricing model, I think a lot of things that help with that change management is proving to the sales organization that there's a lot of data and validity around these pricing model changes. So making sure you have the right research and it's supporting the overall model that you're moving to. But John, maybe you could share a little bit more about how to get buy-in and ease some of the concern that sales teams have in this.
Yeah, James, I think a lot of it is you have to do regular associate research, feedback, surveying them on what they're hearing, what they're seeing. What are they hearing from customers? You got to gather as much fact-based data from quotes they're losing and quotes they're winning, and you've really got to, it's based on a foundation of research. And then as we talked, right, it's got to be, you got to train. You actually have to have training on profitability for your sales team. I think everyone assumes they understand, the sales team understands how important profit is, but you also have to realize under a lot of pressure from customers, to go lower to win, right? So you've got to help them with better data and better training to have them win more often at slightly higher margins.
It's a great point. I think as you look at your sales team out in the market, and they're the front line of the organization, they're always going to be the front line of the organization. But as that team ages out of the organization, and other individuals take that place or other processes fill in those gaps, I think market back view of how those products should be priced, how the services should be priced, taking that guesswork out of it, but also taking that knowledge and really bringing it back to the organization and disseminating that across the entire organization. Besides, maybe those individuals at the branch level or at the front line of the organization who may not necessarily have a defined, consistent, repeatable process in how they price or how they serve that customer. So again, I think market-based data, market-based strategies, really bringing that back to the organization, and then also taking the learnings and the knowledge from those individuals who have been at the front line for years or decades, bringing that back to the core of the organization, and then disseminating a consistent, repeatable process is going to serve the organization, but it's also going to serve your customer better. It's going to put your customer in a better experience with your company. So I think those are some of the things that I would look at first.
So now let's talk about optimizing your pricing as a distributor and a manufacturer. I think it's really important for you to understand what price types you have. And really you have system price, you have a customer specific price, a price that's established for a specific customer for a specific SKU or a group of SKUs. And then you've got manual price. A lot of people call this overrides, right? But it is a salesperson that is making a pricing decision that is not a customer specific price or a system price. And as you look at this screen, you can see that this is typical of how most distributors price. What's unfortunate is most of the pricing teams live on the left-hand side here. They're really doing a lot of work on system price. They're not doing a lot of work on customer specific price, or they're not very involved with the sales team who's making the manual price. And if you think about it as your business, you have your pricing team in general in distribution working on 25% of your business. So you've really got to fix this. You've got to figure out a way to have programs built for each of these three buckets. Your team's probably really good at system price today. How do you get better at customer specific price? And how do you get better at manual price? By the way, customer specific pricing discipline and excellence leads to big top line sales gain. If you can get a big customer priced properly, you can grow top line faster than any other price type.
So John, this chart is fascinating because what it really is showing, and what I'm picking up from this is the majority of teams are focused on the first column here, which is system price. But as you work your way to the right, this is where you really start to see margin leakage when it comes to pricing. How representative is this to a lot of the folks that we work with on B2B distribution and manufacturing?
Yeah, I'd say it's highly representative. It's an example, but it's very true. For the distributors that I help run pricing for and the clients we work with today, most of the time, 85 to 90% of their pricing team's effort is on the far left side. They're dealing with system price. And as I like to say, why are you spending 90% of your work on only 25% of your business, right? Mm-hmm. It's an inverse relationship that needs to be fixed. You can make more money and improve your margins by working on the customer specific pricing and also working with your sales team to get the best manual levels that you can.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense, yeah.
Oh, when you look at sell side pricing, and this is a schematic example, most of it falls here. Many pricing software companies will have a floor, a target, and a stretch. So when you look at your price types laid across, it usually falls very similar schematic that you're looking at here. You've got a small percentage of your sales that are below floor, which is really, you're probably losing money on every transaction below floor. Your target is your statistical mean and some sort of algorithm that adds a few points to it. And then you've got your ceiling at your top. And what ends up happening is most of your manual price changes are made on price types near the bottom, right? People kind of gravitate to the floor. How do I get more competitive? How do I earn more business? So looking at each one of these price types and working on it as a team is critical. And your pricing team should not just be looking at this schematic. Reports should be going out to your sales team on how you're doing. This same graphic applies to manufacturers. Their pricing very similar. Their customer specific price, the price that they're given for Joe's Electric in Geneva, Illinois for a specific SKU, they're going to have it as a CSP in their system or a SPA. So this really is a key area that you really got to look at as a pricing team and what I call a huge gap. And then you got to benchmark. You got to look at your critical areas of pricing practice. You got to, how competitive am I on my commodity price? You've got to understand how your team feels and then address that. So commodities, that is pipe, wire, something that is, considered by the marketplace a price-driven decision. Then you got to look at your non-commodities. This is more your value-added products, your fittings, your tools, the stuff you really make money on. You've got to have an understanding of how your team feels about their price competitiveness. Then you got to understand what they do. When an associate is there at the terminal making a pricing decision and they see a price that they don't think will win, what do? And why do they do it? You have to understand that to be able to move your organization forward. Then you've got to also understand how involved your management is in pricing, right? Not every pricing decision needs to be an upward pricing adjustment. In some cases, you may have to get lower on a SKU or two with a big key customer to grow top line. That's why management price involvement is really important. Then you've got to understand when a customer comes in and says, hey, I can get it cheaper down the street. What do your people do? Do they give them the price that they request? How often do they do it? What are they trying to accomplish with that customer? And then last thing, and this is an area that I'm astounded at that many distributors and manufacturers don't ask, they don't regularly survey their associates on how can we gain more margin? How can we gain more sales? They get it anecdotally, but they do not go out and say, if I take this action, what's the result? And I think it's a very underutilized portion of a pricing plan. So Jay, what do you think?
John, that's a great segue. Pricing strategies start with the associates, and I think that survey goes a long way in really understanding what opportunities exist for the organization to drive, better customer engagement, deliver better profit, deliver, higher sales returns to the company. And I cannot emphasize enough that survey done on a regular basis will start delivering trends or providing trends to you that you can start developing new strategies based on that trend line. And that would be one thing I would really take a hard look on. If you're not surveying your associates, I would start with that immediately, and I would start with understanding how they can serve that customer better and what levers they can pull to manage the price, manage inventory, and ultimately manage the top line revenue.
Yeah, John, I think one of the things that we've seen a lot when adopting some of these strategies is how do you help the team consistently perform? And you mentioned, being able to, have the right reports, have the right data shown to your sales team and your branch teams. But, what's also important in this is tracking how many overrides your sales associates are doing, and also tracking what the reason for those overrides are, because that helps create visibility as you start to aggregate this data and view it at how many times each individual is doing it at, and the total sum of how much they're actually giving at a customer level and even at a SKU level. That data goes a long way into helping leadership teams and even sales associates understand that there's visibility behind this, and there needs to be, if there's bad behavior in some cases, some of that behavior may need to change, or even if there's really good behavior to where some of those individuals could be recognized for it.
Yeah, James, I would say one thing that, just to add to your point, I think a lot of times people don't understand that their sales team is out making quick, fast decisions. And one thing I see often is they may have done all the work. You know, Joe may have done all that work to get his contractor on a CSP with a SPA for a certain manufacturer, a special pricing agreement. They may have done all that work, but they're moving so fast, and sometimes they get nervous about losing business. They're setting what should be the lowest price, a very competitive level to drive that single customer forward. But you'll find sales teams oftentimes they're lowering the price from the already CSP level that they've set. So for each of these buckets, there's different tactics and attack plans. And I've found that if you push out a report to a salesperson and they find out that 20% of the time they're already lowering the price that they themselves set, they'll make a change and it won't hurt top line sales. Then also you can use that data to say, okay, where maybe am I priced a little over competitively?
Yeah.
Where am I trying to get a little too much in a certain top line sales growth? So, 10, 15% of the time, you should be making a downward adjustment to drive top line. 85, 90% of the time, maybe there's a room to get a little more. And you've got to find that right balance for your business.
John, great job on wrapping up the pricing optimization section here. There are a lot of really strong ideas in there for both manufacturers and distributors to pursue independent from one another, but also work jointly on improving how they go to market. So our final section here is going to be taking Q&A from the audience. So if you have any questions, please post it in the comments section, and we're going to take those questions right now. All right, that was a good session here, everyone. So now let's move into the Q&A. John, Jay, welcome to the screen. You guys able to hear me correctly?
We can hear you great.
All right, the audience is good. So yeah, let's dive into the first question here, everyone. This one is on, it looks like data sharing and trust. So I love the idea of sharing data with my distributors. How do I get started, and how do we gain alignment and trust from my distributor customers? Okay, so this must be from a manufacturer. Jay, you want to tackle this one? John?
Sure, I'll tackle it. It's a great question, and sharing data has been a topic that we've spoken about for years now, really trying to be as collaborative and insightful with your partners as possible. One of the things that we look at is when you're sharing data, really kind of go beyond that sales and unit volume data, which is a pretty traditional or typical way of sharing data. This is how much I sold. This is when I sold it. I think if we were to look at this in kind of this modern approach of tomorrow, we would start with that customer or that customer experience. And if you think about the buyer journey, think about how you can share data or start sharing data somewhere within that buyer journey, whether it's early stage or late stage within that journey. Understand even who's visiting, what they're downloading, what forms or contact information they're requesting, and then kind of move through what sales engagement all the way through that quoting and delivery. The information that's in that buyer journey that you have as a manufacturer or distributor is a wealth of knowledge and information that you can start sharing with your partner, but you don't necessarily have to start sharing it all on day one. I would say start with the buyer journey and find some areas where you can start building that trust and start sharing that data. A great example might be the digital platform as well. So if you start looking at their digital data, website visits, searches, purchase history, or even frequency, that may be a good place to start building that trust and sharing that data with your mutual platforms. I think we'll give that information that the other party is seeking, and then collaboratively start bringing that jointly to the end user and improve the buyer experience and customer experience.
Yeah, James, I would just add to what Jay said. I think it's a really exciting time right now to be in the channel. And I think sometimes people are intimidated by the, hey, I don't get as much face-to-face information. I get more digitally. But the way I think about it is this is 15, 20 years ago, somebody would send in a warranty card to a manufacturer, and that's how they would get a contact, or they would call in to your customer service team for a warranty issue or a problem. And
Yeah.
then you would push that out to a distributor and you would hope that something would happen with that. What's changed today is all those former mail pieces and phone calls are now trackable. Now you've got evidence that this came in from this customer that you can actually then get it through the channel very quickly. And I think many people just don't see that as an opportunity. They see it as a threat. What used to be a phone call is now a website visit, but you couldn't track a phone call. You can track a website visit. And I think that's one big way that a lot of people have to change. And why not go into meetings with your web data, your digital data, your interaction data? Doesn't happen very often. I guarantee you, whoever is receiving that message is going to go, whoa, this is different. Maybe this is somebody I want to partner with.
Yeah, great points, guys. And I think we gave quite a few examples today of the types of data that you could start to partner with your distributors on, whether that be, more relevant data points from the supplier scorecard, sharing some of your own data when it comes to, what's happening on engagement level detail across your website. So I think a lot of this just comes down to create more strategic planning and joint planning with your distributors and start to share this data and start to ask for more specific types of data from what you're seeing across some of the use cases that we're sharing here and even some others that maybe your peers are doing in the industry. So great question. This is a big topic. It's not going away, and it's not going to be an easy one to get a lot of data, but it is starting to open up, and we are seeing more of this. So great question. I got another one here, guys, regarding gross margin leakage. John, I think this goes back to some of what you were talking about, and it says, how do I get started in shifting more of my team's efforts away from system pricing and into more of the CSPs and manual overrides?
Yeah, I love this question because if you're working, let's first start with a distributor example. If you're at a distributor, you really have to start with what are we doing today as a pricing team? And I mean, I'll give you an example of that. When I was at one of the largest distributors in North America, I came in leading a pricing team, and we were doing 8 reports that we sent out every week on system pricing. It was like, hey, here's your overrides. Here's what you're doing. Please listen to us as a pricing team. And what we found is we were putting all this time in reports and concentrating on system price. And when we started, I just said when I got there, I'm like, okay, let's turn a report off. We're sending it to 40 people internally. Let's just this Monday, not send it and wait until we hear complaints. We had to get to the 6th report before we ever had someone reach out to us and say, hey, I actually use that. You got to think about what are you doing that is counterintuitive? And it goes back to that chart, James. If your team is spending 85% of their time optimizing the system price, you're probably not winning. The same applies to manufacturers. Manufacturers spend so much time on problem solving and working on issues. Why are you not creating better prices that are tied to customers at the distributor that then you can drive volume with? You can grow your business effectively with CSPs, but most manufacturers spend a lot of time on system price, which they don't sell at. So you just really, it's almost that basic and that simple. So starting there and then constantly surveying your internal associates, your end customers, and your manufacturer partners, or if you're a manufacturer, you're surveying your distributors, is critical to improvement.
Yeah, I think just adding to that point, John, on the surveying, that takes the decision and the choice out of, any one person's opinion, right? And it brings data to the surface to say, okay, we know what's going on here now. Here's the data that's showing it through the survey. Now let's take action on some of the gaps that this data is showing. So I think that's a great first step. If somebody doesn't have alignment across all branches and all the organization, I think that's a pretty safe first step.
Yeah, agreed.
Okay, great. So yeah, let's field another question here. This one, Jay, I think is on inventory segmentation. So it says,
near and dear to my heart.
Sorry, what was that, Jay?
Near and dear to my heart. Let's hear it. Let's hear it.
Yeah, it says, I rank my inventory today. I struggle with bringing in customer data to get a real inventory picture. I need my C's and D's to drive my A's and B's. Yes, we've heard that before.
Right,
How do I work around this gap to drive growth between my customer data and my inventory data? Yeah, that's a great question.
Yeah, it is a great question and really insightful, and I'm glad it came up. And we did touch on that throughout the webinar today, right? If you're classifying your SKUs as A, B, C, and D as an example, as the question kind of points out, as we said, you're always going to have C's and D's. You're never not going to have C's and D's. Now, I think the challenge comes in is that if your C's and D's are there to drive volume and sales with your A's and B's, then you have to understand the relevancy and importance of that SKU and appropriately manage it to support your A and B business. So it's not like you're going to ignore your C's or D's. The point of what we're trying to articulate today is that you're going to treat them differently. You're going to manage them differently than your A's and B's. Your A's and B's may have a different inventory plan, a different sales structure. They might have, greater turns, the list goes on. And your C's and D's might ultimately be managed as, special purchase order or less frequent purchases or smaller amounts of inventory, or it may be sold in certain markets versus others. Now, if your C's and D's are driving your A's and B's, I would contend that if you have a few of those, meaning less than a dozen, you may be able to just reclassify those as B. Because if they're really driving that A-B behavior, then maybe that SKU should really be a B. So you might just be classifying it wrong, even if it's lower volume. So if you use a traditional approach of sales volume or margin, and it may not reach the threshold to be a B, or it may not reach the margin to be a B, you may reclassify it as a B anyway, because it really drives B and A behavior that you're looking for. Yeah. Now, if you have hundreds of those, meaning that you have hundreds of SKUs that are classified as C or D, and those are there to support your A and B business, I would argue that maybe you need to reclassify what your A, B's, and C's definition are. Maybe the definitions aren't correct, and you might want to reclassify that. So I would look at dialing in that inventory, making sure you understand what C's and D's really are, understand which ones are driving A's and B's, and if they should be treated like an A and B, because the point of the classification isn't necessarily to tell your customer, oh, this is an A or this is a B, this is C. It's how you manage that SKU. That's the point. And if you're going to manage it like a B anyway, then treat it like a B, but understand that that B exists solely for the purpose of driving greater A and B volume. And I think closing that gap of understanding your customer demand, meaning what's the forecast, what's the usage, how much sales does this C or D SKU drive for me, and where does it drive it? And so look at your sales history, your trend lines, market trend and market data, forecast data, and understand, does that C SKU or D SKU put me in a position to win with my A's and B's? And if I can see the trend line increasing or maintaining, then I may just want to treat it like a B anyway. If it's declining, meaning that this C SKU is currently driving my A and B, but the market looks like it's going to soften, then you want to reduce your inventory position. You want to, de-risk your inventory. Don't go heavy on that. Make sure you get the appropriate amount and readjust more often based on where the market's going. Don't go long on the C SKU if you think the market's going to soften over the next, 3 to 6 months. So those are some, I think, easy ways that I would start, James, on how to kind of manage those C's and D's, even though I need them, but most of my business is driven with the A's and B's.
Yeah. James, I would just add, we didn't talk a lot about the depth of A, B, C, D today. We could have 3 or 4 webcasts just on that.
Yeah.
But I mean, you got it. I always think about it as it's a lake, right? Your inventory is a lake. The deepest part of the lake needs to be, those are your A or B SKUs that go way down. That's 20 feet deep. You've got a SKU, but you got a lot of them. That's where the big fish live. As you go into the shore and it gets shallower, that's where your C's and D's live, right? Smaller fish, right? Things you need to get out into the deep water where you're fishing, but really the depth of them is much less. So it's always a good analogy I always use. The deepest part of the lake is where your A's should live. You should have the most of those, the greatest depth. As you go into shore, you get your B's and C's and your D's. You have to have them because it can create a bad customer experience. But as you go into shore, the customer may wait 2 or 3 days for a C or D because the expectation is it's a special order. And I think a lot of people really screw up the depth because they're tracking just like number of hits. They're not bringing in the customer size. They're not bringing in the size of the transaction into their scoring system. So that's something, an area I think we excel in as a firm. And I just think you really got to dive into the data.
Yeah. Yeah, great answers, guys. And I think this is a good point just to wrap up the Q&A. It concludes our program for today of the workshop session. If you would like to receive a copy of today's slides, please reach out to us via email or on LinkedIn, and we'll send you a copy of that presentation. If you'd like assistance in improving your capabilities at your organization, across your team, whether that be across profitability, pricing, inventory, any type of voice of audience research, please reach out to us directly. We can certainly help you with that. Or if you would like to schedule a workshop very similar to this, we can come in and facilitate a workshop, dive really deep into some very specific challenges that you might be facing. We can also help you and your team with that aspect of it. Jay, John, thank you for your insights today. And to our audience, thank you for attending today. And thank you for your participation. Best of luck to you as you go on your journey of mastering channel performance. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.